Welcome everyone to our fourth and last How to Build a Learning Management System in Dittofi webinar. We're super excited for this one. We're connecting the front end to all of the database and back end work that we've done the previous 3 weeks. So Samuel is going to continue building, and we're going to watch. Please feel free to ask all of your questions in the chat. We will try to answer them as they come up. And then, of course, we'll save a little time at the end for Q&A. Samuel, you can take it away. Thank you so much for being here.
So in the last few sessions, we basically set up our database, and then we set up the backend connecting to that, reading and writing records and so on. And today what we're going to do is start building our front end and basically integrating with all of the work that we did in the previous 3 weeks. So to get started right away, the front end in our platform is basically made up of 3 separate components. First off, we've got the actual kind of visual interface that we're going to be building. So the buttons, the navigation bars, the images, all that kind of thing. As we build that, that's going to be generating HTML and CSS code. But we're going to be doing this using a kind of visual drag and drop builder. We also have a concept here of prefabs, which are basically reusable components that you can drop on your screen. So this could be things like UI libraries that you might want to use and integrate with. Our platform supports integrating with any kind of UI library that you'd wish to use. Then second main component of the front end is this concept of variables. We looked at variables on the back end of the app. We have a similar concept on the front end. The purpose of the variables on the front end is basically to collect up and also to display variable data. So if you had a table on your screen, for example, and you wanted to display a list of courses in that table, that list of courses is going to be dynamic. It's going to be loaded from the back end of your app. So in order to do that, we're going to use this concept of variables here. Similarly, when a user signs up, you need to collect up like their email, their password, and so on. And again, we're going to be using variables to collect up that information. So variables are really to do with displaying variable data and also collecting variable data. And then the third thing is this concept of front-end actions. So we looked previously at backend actions, which allowed us to do things like create records in tables, send emails, and so on. Front-end actions are quite similar, but the difference is they run from the front end of your app. So the kind of things you do with front-end actions are navigate to new pages, display pop-up boxes, this kind of thing, stuff related to the front-end parts of your app. So the goals for today, we're going to build up our front end, this using kind of some out-of-the-box components that we've got. And then we're going to look at how you can actually connect your front end to the back end of your app. This is a little visual kind of showing how that works. So we've got our front end over here. This is the actual visual part of the app. Like I said, the buttons, the images, and so on, the things that your user sees. And this is going to connect to the back end to like pull the data out of the database, for example, or write data into your database. And it's going to do that using this concept of front-end actions. So I'm going to jump across now to the builder, and we're going to jump into actually how we're going to do this for real. So I step across into this tab here. Before I get started, there's one other thing I wanted to mention, which is on the database design here. Just in advance of this, I've added a couple of new columns to the table, nothing major. So I've added a description column here if we wanted to add a description to one of your courses. I've also added a URL where you can store like an image for your course. And then on the lessons table, I've also added a description here in case you want to have a description of our lesson. And I've also added a video URL in case you want to have like a video attached to our lesson that we can display. We'll get into how we're going to display this information in a bit. But this should make sense if you've gone through the first lesson in this series as well. So to begin with, if I come across to this page here, this is where we do the kind of front end building for the app. On the left-hand side of the screen, you've got components, which you can basically drag onto the page to start building up your app. These components are grouped under kind of what they're for. So the layout ones to do with positioning your or constructing like the layout of your app, whereas things like typography are to do with displaying text. Things like forms are to do with getting like input from forms, this kind of thing. We also have this concept of partials and prefabs. We'll skip partials for now, but if I jump to prefabs, you can see a prefab is essentially a kind of composed component that you can pull onto the screen. So a reusable component like a card or a table or something like that, which consists of multiple different components, but you can quickly drag on to build out the application. As you drag the components onto the screen, you can look under the navigator here and you'll see all the components that you've got. You'll see the way this is structured is you have kind of components inside components. So here we have a container. Inside that container, you might add some columns. Inside those columns, you might add like a heading, for example. As you do this in the background, like I said, we generate the code for the screen, which you can see at the bottom. And if you're kind of developer or technical, you can actually come here and kind of edit this code directly here as well. So this is kind of two ways. So that just moved from a H1 to like an H2, for example. So there's a direct mapping between what we see here and what's under here. What I'm going to do to begin with, though, if I come to this pages section and do a new page, we have a whole bunch of different page templates that you can take. So you can select one of these, like my album one here, and just do create page. And this will create the page, but install some kind of default template on the page that you can use. So I'm going to start off with this one to speed things up. I'm going to select this bottom div block here. If I press Control X, then I can cut this component. You can see at the bottom here, it says cut in clipboard. I've done Control X. And then I can step back to my home page actually. And I'm just going to click here and do Control V to paste this onto my home page. This will be the home page of the app. If I want to edit the text on the screen to begin with, I can just double click on this. So this could be something like courses. And this could be something like sign up and take one of our courses, something like so. I want to delete any of the components on the screen. I can click on any of the individual components, like these different text links here, for example, that I might not want. I can just press the delete button like so. Maybe we can leave one text link here, which is going to link to our kind of instructor dashboard, or that dashboard. Again, if I click into my navigator here, I can see the kind of components I've got on the screen. If I look at the login and sign up ones I've got here, you can see I've got a button here, but that button is inside this modal component here. So what a modal component is essentially a component with some pop-up functionality attached to it. So you can see here, this modal actually, this button actually contains this pop-up here for a kind of like login form, for example. If you click on the different components and go to this little cog here, then you can see the settings that are associated with the component. So for the modal component I've got selected here, you can see the settings to do with whether I should show or hide that component. If I was to click on a input box, you'll see the settings are to do with like the placeholder in the input box, for example. So when you add the different components to the screen, you can take a look and see what kind of settings you've got for each one. For these links here, for example, you've got somewhere to enter in a URL that you're going to be linking to, and so on. If I scroll down, I've also got some cards at the bottom here that have been automatically added. These cards contain images. On the images, we need to set like a source to say what we're going to display. And then on these text components here, the paragraph, you've got to kind of choose what text you actually want to display. So far, everything on this screen is displaying kind of static text, placeholder images, and so on. So our first task is going to be to kind of substitute this static information for dynamic data that we pull from our backend. So if you remember, if we come back to this backend action screens here, we had an action here called get, or in fact, we had an action here called get all courses, which gets a list of courses. If I click run, you can see that runs and it returns the course that I've got in my courses table here. So what I want to do is I want to take the response of this particular action. I want to take this list of courses and I want to display that full list of courses on this in place of these different cards that I've got here. If we just add a second one as here, let's just call this 1 second course for now. And hope about user ID 1. Let's see. Nope. Let's do user ID 3. Same as the other one. So if I run this again now, you'll see actually we now have 2 courses getting returned. So ideally now in our front end, we'd be able to display those 2 courses. So in order to achieve this, what you need to do is you need to run this particular action the same way that we're kind of running it here, but you need it to run automatically when the page first loads for your app. That's the first thing. And then once you've actually run this, you need to take this response that you're getting back here, and you need to display that response on your screen. So to run the backend action, we have to use these front-end actions here. So backend actions live solely on the back end of your app. And if you want to run them, you have to run them using a front-end action, which will run from the front end of your app. So if I click on this front-end actions tab here, I've added a few in here, which I'll talk you through now. So let's click into this get all courses front-end action first. So when you look at this to begin with, you can see this looks quite similar to the backend style actions that we created. You have a kind of workflow builder, same as we have on the back end. But as I said, the difference is these ones here all running from the front end of your app. If you come and take another look at one of these backend actions, like this get all courses action here, you'll remember the first thing we did when we created the action was to define what the trigger for the actions should be. So what's actually going to cause this action to run. And in this case, and in fact, in all of the actions we made, we defined the trigger to be an endpoint. And I said, whenever you want to run something from the front end of your app, you need to set the trigger to endpoint. And now is when you will find out why. The reason for that is on the front end of your app now, you have a particular event that you can add here called run endpoint. And this run endpoint event allows you to trigger one of these backend actions by running the trigger endpoint that you've kind of attached to that action. So for example, when I select run endpoint here, this run endpoint asks me which endpoint I want to run. Here you should see a list of all of the backend actions that we made, which are set to trigger endpoint. So we can see get all courses, create course, and so on. So I pick the endpoint I want. That's the first step. Now, this particular front-end action will be triggering that back-end action to run. So we're now in a point where the front end of our app can do the equivalent of what we're manually doing here by clicking run action, but it can do it automatically now in this particular front-end action. When we run this endpoint here, So when we trigger this action to run by triggering this endpoint that we've attached to it, we get some data back that we see down here. So we get this list of courses. And the other thing that we get back is we get back a code, which tells us if the action has run successfully. If this code is 200, it means the action's run successfully. If it's anything else, it means the action has failed to run. In our run endpoint front-end action, we have two boxes here to fill in, one called response as and one called response code as. And what these are allowing us to do is to store the response that we're getting from our action and store the response code that we're getting from our action in variables and give names to those variables. So the response we're going to be calling get all courses response, and the response code we're going to be calling get all courses response code. So when this runs, it's going to return this data and this code. This code 200 is going to go into a variable called get all courses response code. And this data here is going to go into a variable called get all courses response. What I can then do is later on in my action, I can add other events, and these events can then access this response and this response code. So for example, in my next event here, I've got a condition. This is creating a kind of if or logic. So saying if a particular condition is met, then do something. So in my case here, I'm saying if the response code, so here you'll see we have the get all courses response code, which is going to store the code that's returned from this action. So I'm saying if this response code is equal to a particular value, then do something. The particular value is going to be 200. So I'm saying if the response code is equal to 200, then do something. And that's what this description here is telling me as well. The way I am saying if this is equal to 200 is I have created another variable on my front end called success code, which you can see under this variables tab here. And this is storing the value 200. So this is just a constant, unchanging variable that I've just created to store the value 200. So if I come back to this action here, this is saying get all courses, and then it's saying if the response code is equal to 200, then kind of do something afterwards. So we just come back out of here. That's the basic concept of a front-end action. It's something that's an operation that runs from the front end of your app. And the main thing you're going to be doing with this is running endpoints or running actions by triggering the associated endpoint from the back end. If I take a look at some of these other ones that I put in, I've got another one here called get current user, which gets the current logged in user. So you'll remember we had an action here called get current user. When I run this, it returns me the data of the user that's just logged in. So if I look at this one here, you'll see I've started off again with a run endpoint. I've picked the get current user action, which is available because it's getting triggered by an endpoint. This is returning some data, which I'm calling get current user response. Then it's returning a code, which I'm calling get current user response code, which we hope to be 200. And then I've got a condition, which is checking if the user response code is equal to 200. And if it is, then I'm, again, going to do something with that afterwards, which I'll get to in a minute. And if you click into any of these, you'll see they're all exactly the same. So we've got create course. This is running the endpoint to create the course. It's getting a response code, checking if that's equal to 200, and then doing something. So this is the first part of integrating with your backend, is to create different front-end actions. You should have these exactly the same as the backend actions in terms of their names, so like sign up, login, and so on. And then inside these, you need to add a run endpoint event and pick the relevant action here that's getting triggered by an endpoint to actually run. And then normally you'll have a condition afterwards, which checks the response code to make sure that this ran successfully. So that's the first part. And then the second part, we can now run those endpoints. I said we now want to take the response from this endpoint and we actually want to display it on the screen. So we're able to run it automatically, but now we need to actually display it. And the way this works is coming to the second concept for the front end, which is the variables here. So a variable is essentially a placeholder that's storing some data in it. And that data can then be displayed automatically on the screen. So for example, I have a variable here called getCurrentUser, which is going to be storing the current logged in user. If I click on any of my text components on the screen, you'll see, as well as having an option to kind of type in static text in here, I also have an option to attach this text to a particular variable. So I can click on this little T and you'll see I have the getCurrentUser variable here. So I can say getCurrentUser email, for example, and this would then dynamically display the email of the current user rather than the kind of literal text. If I click on this again, I can select literal value and that will change it back to just displaying literal text on the screen. So these variables can be used for displaying variable data on the screen. If you want to create a new variable, you just click the little plus button here, enter the name of the variable and the kind, which is the type of data that variable is going to be storing. So for example, if we take a look at another one, let's take a look. I've got one here called get all courses that I've added. This variable here is designed to store a list of all courses. So store a list of all the courses returned from this action here. So what I can do now then is I can take this variable here, and again, I can try attaching that to different components on the screen. If I go to attach this to a kind of single text component, it doesn't really make too much sense, because if we look again at this action that we're running, you can see this returns a list of courses. So it doesn't really make sense to attach this to a single text. Actually, you want to display a list of data on the screen. So to do that, if you click on any of your components on the screen, you'll see you have this option here under the component settings called repeating with. You'll see this on the images, paragraphs, everything will have this particular option. I can click on this and I can then attach this to a variable as well. So I can select my get all courses here and attach that to this particular div block that I've got selected here. This will then repeat this component for every record in this variable. So I can actually delete these two here. And instead, I'm just going to dynamically repeat this with all of the different courses in this variable. So if I was to, let's say now, go back to my get all courses action. As a reminder, we started off by running the get all courses action by triggering its endpoints. We then checked if the response code is equal to 200. I said if it was, we were going to do something. And this is the last kind of piece then. What we're going to do is we're going to take the response from this endpoint. So we're going to take that list of courses, and I'm going to use this set field event to put that list of courses into the get all courses variable. So I run my endpoint. My endpoint gives me a response code, which I'm calling this, and it gives me a response that I'm calling get all courses response. I'm check that the response code is equal to success, equal to 200. And if it is, then I'm going to take the get all courses response, and I'm going to write that response into this get all courses variable that I've made. So the set field event allows you to write a value into one of these variables that you've made over here. So now I can run that action, and I can put all the data that's returned into this get all courses variable here, which I've also attached to this particular div block here. So now if I we've looked at what an element is, we've looked at the navigator, we've seen the variables and the front-end actions and the pages. And we've also had a quick look at the settings for the div blocks and so on, and how you can attach those to variables as well. If I come across now to this fourth tab here, this fourth tab here is where you can come to actually run or trigger any of the front-end actions that you've made to run. So if we think about this get all courses front-end action that we've got here, we want this to run when your application first loads. We want this to run as soon as this page loads in order to get all the courses from here, from this backend action, and put them into that variable that we're displaying. You might, if you had a kind of search feature, you might want to run that action after someone had typed in the search box, or after they clicked on like a search button or something like that. So in other words, there are different times that you might want to run that front-end action and different ways you might want to trigger it. And this section here is where you define that. If I click add front-end action here, you'll see I have an option to say on click, let's run a particular front-end action. So let's run like the get all courses action, for example. Or you could have on like mouse over. So when someone mouses over the screen, then we run this particular front-end action. Or in this case, we have one, most of these are quite self-explanatory. We have one more kind of platform-specific one, which is this component did mount trigger here. And this means I'm going to run this particular action as soon as this element, or as soon as this component first appears on the screen. So if I was to just build this now, what we should see now is when we run this, it's going to run this front-end action as soon as the page kind of finishes loading. So if I do preview now, just load up this app. You can see now, as soon as the page loads, we kind of run that front-end action. And that's why we can now see two div blocks down here rather than just one. So we've got two because we're repeating with the get all courses variable. So what we did was, as soon as this component first appeared on the screen, we set the trigger to component did mount. So as soon as this component first appeared on the screen, we ran this front-end action. That front-end action triggered the get all courses back-end action. It checked that the response code from that action was 200. And if it was 200, then it took the response and it puts it into the get all courses variable, which we've attached to this div block here, which is why this has got repeated multiple times. What I can do now is I can click into the different components within this div block, and I can start binding them to variable information as well. So I can click on this like text component here, and I can say row, like name, for example. If I want to display the name of the course, I can go to this image, and where I've got the source, I can click this here and I can say variable, and I can take the image URL that I added as well. So now this is going to display the kind of dynamic image URLs that we have in our table here. So I'm just going to copy this one actually into this second record here. So now if I refresh the page again, we now see we get the names of the different courses that we've added here. and we get the URLs for those images we've got in our database as well. So that's the basics of running a kind of GET request to get data. What we can do next is start hooking up basically just more of those front-end actions. So what I'm going to do now is create a second page here. Let's just delete this one I'm not using. I'll create a second page here, and again, I'll take one of these templates. And this page will be the kind of template for displaying an individual course. So let's call this just course. And where you've got the slug, this will be the kind of URL that this page lives under. So I'm just going to call this course. And then I can save this again. That will kind of set up this page and give me this template to begin with. So now if I was to, let's just build this one more time. If I was to come here and go to like course, so go to the same like slug URL that I put in here. This is now going to display the content to the second page, so I've just added. On this particular page here, we're going to have some kind of dynamic data displayed as well. So on the right-hand side of the screen, we want to display like the course lessons going down the screen. And down here, I want to display like the lesson description that someone's actually clicked on. So you can kind of click down these and pick different lessons, and that will dynamically update the description down here. And then in this section here, I want to kind of include a video, which is going to dynamically display the video that we've put in this video URL column here. So in this case, if we come back to the work we did before, we had a particular one here called Get Course Lessons. We could run this for like a particular course. So if we run this for like course ID 2, for example, and we got back a list of data, so we could see a list of different lessons for that course. So on the front end, we're going to have the same feature that we have with the Get All Courses. We're going to have a front-end action called Get Course Lessons. And you can see this is identical. We'll just run the endpoint, Get Course Lessons. We're going to check the response code is 200. If it is, we're going to take the response, we're going to take all the data, and we're going to put it into a variable. And the variable is this Get Course Lessons one here. So to begin with, what I can do is just come and delete a couple of these kind of static items here. And I can then, let's say, change this list item. I can say I want to repeat this with the lessons. Then inside here, I can say display the individual name for the lesson, for example, like so. If I now come and click on any of the elements on my page, I can add the get course. I can say component did mount again. So I can say when the page first loads, I will want to run the get course lessons action here. Now in this particular case, we had if you remember, an option here to specify which course we're going to be getting the lessons for. So here I said I want to get it for course ID 2. If you look at other websites that you might have used in the past, quite often you'll see in like your URL at the top of the page, it will have some kind of dynamic information. So it might have something like this at the end, which kind of tells you which particular screen you're actually looking at. You can see that if you check out on like Facebook, LinkedIn, any of these products and look at like your profile page, you'll see like a Facebook link at the end. It will have like your name because it's telling system that it's kind of loading the page for you specifically. What this part at the end here is, this is technically called a query variable. And you can add these in our platform as well by going to the page settings here and looking under the page variables. So I can add a query variable here, for example, called like course ID, which could be a number variable. And now when this particular course page opens, it will allow you to set the ID dynamically. So you'd have something like course ID 3, 4, and so on. So to show you how that works, let's add another front-end action here. And I'm going to call this one open course. So far, we looked at the run endpoint events and the set field and condition ones. You've also got one here called open page, which is under the navigation section here. And here I can say pick the course page, and I can pick a particular course ID that I want to open this page for now. So when this runs, it's going to open this particular page, but it's going to dynamically set the query variable up here with something that I pass into it. So what I could do is I could come to my home page here. I could come to this repeating card that I've got here, maybe click on this view button here. I could attach a front-end action. I could say on click, I want to run the open course front-end actions. Now when I click on this, it's going to take me to the course page. So let's just test that out quickly to show how that works. One thing we're currently missing at the moment is we didn't actually specify which particular course we're going to be opening actually. So what we need to do is if I click on this open course front-end action again, at the top of the action, we have this concept here of input variables. If I come here and add a variable here, which I could call open course ID, what I can now do is under this event where I'm going to do open page, I'm going to do open page course, and I'm going to take this variable and open my page with that as the course ID. But now if I look at my kind of on-click open course, you'll see I have an option to set that same input variable that I added. So this is allowing me to pass variable information into that front-end action. So I could say I want to take the ID of the row that I'm iterating through and pass that into my action. So if we build this again now, we should see this particular error we got gets resolved over here. And then we can just test clicking on this particular button. So if I come, let's go to my home page again. And you'll see now if I click on this view button here, it takes me through, but now it says like course ID 2. If I click on this one here, it's going to say course ID 35. So it's taking the ID from our courses table 2 and 35 and using that in the URL here. If I now go to this page again and I say, I still want to run that get course lessons action. This get course lessons is also expecting a course ID. So I can now come here and say, I want to take the course ID from my URL, and you'll find that as a variable, but under this pages section now. So I can do course ID like so. So if I now build this again, when I now click on that item, it should bring me through like it did before into this screen here. But now it's going to run this get course lessons front-end action. It's going to pass in the ID for the page that I'm actually looking at. So if I go into here now, we now get our free kind of lessons displayed down here on the right-hand side. So the next step is I want to click on one of these different lessons and I want to kind of load up the content to that given lesson on the left-hand side of the page. So to do that, I'm going to start off by adding another variable over here. This one here, I'm going to call, let's say, current course lesson. So this variable is going to represent the current lesson that I just selected. This could be a model, and the model is going to be from the lessons table. So that's going to create a variable called current course lessons. And I can now take this variable and use it to kind of substitute out some of the static data on the screen. So I could click on this paragraph here, for example, click on this text and say I want to bind this to the current course lesson description, for example, like so. So that should now take the description from here and display that dynamically. And I can also come here, click on the component we've got here and say, as the source for this particular video, I'm going to take the current course lesson and take the video URL. So the component we're using here, you can see is just a iframe component. And this iframe component will allow you to display URLs to display videos in. Specifically, I'm using ones at the moment just from YouTube for this first build here. So now I have that variable. The other thing I could do is I can click on any of these different components here, and you'll see each one of these has a kind of show property associated with it. So the show property allows you to control whether a component displays based on a given condition. So for example, you could say, I don't want to display this if the current user is not an instructor or something like that. You can have some condition that's going to hide this data. In this particular case, I want to say, don't display this unless the user has clicked on and selected a particular lesson. And to do that, I can just come here and I can find my current course lesson and just attach that to the show component. And this means if this current course lesson is empty, then let's just hide this section on the left. So now, how can I actually set this current course lesson? I need to say, when I click on this div block, when I click on one of these individual lessons, then I'm going to take the lesson that I've clicked on and put that into my current course lesson. So to do that, I can come and add another front-end action. This front-end action I'm going to call set current course lesson. Again, I'm going to add one of these input variables that I mentioned a moment ago, which I'm going to call current lesson, or I can call this one, let's say, selected lesson. This is going to be a model, and it's going to be a lesson. And then I'm going to add an event here, and we're going to use that set field event that we saw on the previous actions. And I'm going to say, I want to take my current course lesson variable that I made, and I want to set its value equal to the selected lesson. And save. And now I can say, add front-end action here, on click, set current course lesson equal to the individual lesson that I've just clicked on, so the individual row that I've just clicked on here. So if we just build this again now, if I come over now and just, let's say, refresh this one again. So we should have designed it slightly differently. If I click on these now, we can see this loads up the kind of lesson 1, loads up lesson 2 with the different kind of dynamic data at the bottom, and changes the videos and so on in our top section here. So now we're able to kind of load up that course, those course lessons. We can click on them and load up the data on the left-hand side of the screen. What I want to do quickly now is just hook up some more of these actions to kind of log in, sign up, and so on. So if I now go to my, let's say, sign up button here and go and open up this particular module that I've got, you'll see here I've got a form with like an email and password section. If we take a look at our sign up action, you'll see we've got, when we run this, we want to pass an email and password and also a role, which is going to be something like instructor or member. So I'm just going to copy this by doing Control-C, paste it, and I'm going to change this last one to role. I'm then going to come here and take a select dropdown, which is basically a dropdown that lets you pick from a list of options. And the options that I could have could be instructor, and I could add another option here, which is going to be like member, for example. And then this first option that I've got, I could say, I could select a role, for example. I can just leave this one blank, actually, that's fine. So we said before that variables can be used for displaying data, but also collecting up data as well. What I meant by that is I can now click on these different input boxes that I've got here and these drop downs, and I can also attach these to variables as well. So I could come here and attach this input box to a variable that I've created already called email or login email or sign up email. I could connect this one to one that I've called password. And I connect this one to one that I've called role. So now when I type in these different boxes or select from the drop-down list of roles, it's going to take whatever I type and it's going to write it into the variable that I've attached to it. In order to actually see that happening, I'm just going to add a temporary component here on the page, which we'll delete in a second. And I'm going to attach this to the same like email one here, so you can see exactly what I mean. And then if I just build this again, so now if I come, let's say, and just refresh this page again, just click on this sign up button here and start typing in here, you can see as I type, the data that I'm typing is getting pushed into this sign up email variable that I've attached to this box here. And then I've just added this heading here to display it underneath. So you can see that these inputs, these variables can be attached to them, and that can be used to collect up data. So the variables can be used to collect data as well as display it. If I now look at my front-end actions, you'll see I have one called create. In fact, I have one called sign up. And the sign up one is doing the same as all the others that we've looked at. It's just running the sign up endpoint. In this case, when we run this endpoint, we need to pass it some data. We need to pass the email, role, and so on of the user that's signing up. So when I pick my sign up action, my sign up endpoint here, it's going to ask me to fill in those email, password, and role. And what I can then do is I can just assign those to the same variables that I've attached to the input boxes in my form. So you'll see the sign up email, sign up password, and sign up role here. Email, password, and role. So I type in here, it's going to take whatever I type, put it into this variable. And then when that front end action runs, it's going to send that information to the action. I can then come to this submit button here, and I could say on click and then run the sign up action. I could then come and do the same now for my login one. So if I come here and just do show, I could create a couple of variables here called email or login email and login password. And then I could click on this submit button, and again, I could just say on click and then log in. And I can just, let's hide this here. Now just quickly going to again, delete some of these components up here. This search one, I think. And I'm going to give another example of that. Actually, how we can test this for real. So if I click the build button again here, and then come to this screen here, just refresh. I can now do sign up. If I come in here and let's put in like a new email. And select like instructor, for example, and click submit. And then if we actually take a look in our backend, we can see that new Samuel Virgo 2 has been like sent to our backend by the sign up form there as well. So that's how we can kind of hook up these sign up forms here. Finally, we just take a very quick look for your time at this get current user option here. So the get current user front end action we've added here is doing the same as the others. It's running the get current user backend action, checking the response code is equal to 200. And if it is, then it's taking the response and it's putting it into this get current user option here. I've also added a second set field of event down here, which is just taking a variable that we've called is logged in, and it's setting the value of that equal to true. So if this get current user runs successfully, then we know the user has successfully logged in. If they hadn't, we would get like a 401 error code response saying that you're not logged in. This is how we're going to check if someone's actually logged in. So if the response code is not equal to 200, then we're just going to set that is logged in equal to false instead. What I could do now then on the front end is I could click on, for example, these different modals that I've got here, and I could use like this show property again to say only display these when user is not logged in. So we say when is logged in equal to false, like so. So now this will hide that login button when the user is not actually logged in. And I could just actually copy this and do the same on the other side. So I can say when the user is not logged in, only show this when the user is actually not logged into the particular account. And then if we were to have a separate kind of dashboard screen over here, I could say only display this. So I could say show when the current user role. And again, you could use one of these formulas here where you can simply say is equal to and then instructor. So only going to display this if the current user is actually an instructor. And yeah, so if I now just build this again quickly now. And just refresh this. Wait for this first course to load. Now we could say, should I come here? I can remember what my password details were again. Let's see. Or in fact, I am logged in now, which is always see the dashboard because my current user is one of the instructor users. I guess if I was to come here and switch this to like member, for example, let's see. Yeah, so now it actually hides that kind of dashboard up here. So only instructors can kind of click through to that. Where we're going to the end of the hour, so maybe we should stop now and take questions.
Sure. I think most of them were answered. We have one from Rob. Can you set it up? I think the inputs to remember a user name or email.
Would that be to make sure the user stays logged in or more, so that when they go to log in again, it kind of auto shows
Yep.
their
Yep.
email?
Exactly.
That should happen by set out to type. Yeah. That should be possible. Yes. I actually think that will happen. Let me see. Although it didn't this time. Let's double check. I thought that would happen by default, but maybe I need to
I think
set.
it does. I've noticed it remembers.
I think that depends actually maybe on the browser that you're running it through, potentially.
Yeah.
So some of them will do
And
that.
and your settings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them won't. Yeah, I think that must be it.
Awesome. And I think, does anyone else have any questions? Think that's it. Let me hang on just a moment. Jordan Richardson is asking, is there a plugin market for Dittofi? Will be soon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, can you take it?
No, you go and you send me, you give it.
Yeah, so for different areas of the app, essentially, from the page builder here, you can build your own libraries of components. So the ones that I've been using in this one here, actually, it's my own kind of component library, but this can then be taken and installed into other applications. And you yourself, you can build these libraries as well, and you can publish them and other people can go and install them. That's kind of for this front end stuff that we're looking at here. And you can also do the same, building whole apps, sharing those as templates that people can install. And you can also do it with individual kind of backend services as well. If you want to build a particular like backend integration into some API, for example, and then release it, then you can do the same thing. And we're also going to be creating an option to create schemas, which you can also publish and people can install directly as well. So kind of every component you can do that with individually, or you can do it all in one go with a whole template.
And at the moment, the only people who can do that are us. But we're going to soon open that up to the other people, so people can start to I guess a select group of people to start with, so that people can start to put in their own backend services, the different API integrations and whatever, and then distribute those through the platform as well. And I believe even this application, I think what the plan to do next is to finish off the application possibly in our own time, and we might run another session. We haven't decided yet. But just sort of like tidy it up, and then we're going to release this as a template, and then we're going to give that template away with a discount code to everyone who's shown up for at least one of these events that we've run, so that you can have your own LMS template as well with the full code export and everything attached to it also.
Awesome. And what are modules in Dittofi?
This is very similar to what we were just discussing, but the module is basically a plugin that you can install, but specifically for, it's a plugin. It's the same thing, actually, a plugin that you can install into an existing app. So a template will be a whole app that you can kind of install and start with, whereas a module is just a plugin that you can install into an existing app. So an example would be, we've got like a Stripe module that you can install if you want to take payments via Stripe. Or we've got like a Google module you can install if you want to use like Google authentication, for example, for your app, that kind of thing.
And Prono Coders has plans to, as soon as we're allowed to, has plans to release several modules for Dittofi, matching what we currently have for Bubble. So we're excited to do that. We've got 25. We released 25 of them this month. So
Wow.
yeah. Awesome. Any other questions? Well, thank you everybody for being here. please do go sign up to Dittofi at dittofi.com. Use the discount code here for a 1-month free trial. Please also check out the Dittofi Bootcamp at dittofi.com. And you can always work with us at Pro No Coders if you have Dittofi questions and you need help. We run office hours 7 days per week. In fact, we're starting office hours right now, and you can always come and ask us your Dittofi questions. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you, Sonia.
Thanks.
Thank you.